and I'm a big fan of the comedy show Father Ted. So what links these three things? Because I was a biology teacher, I know what a woman is. I know that women have 2 X chromosomes. In some quarters, it might be regarded as the wrong thing to say. On my union Facebook page, they advertised Drag Queen Bingo as a social event for newly qualified teachers. In the end, it was cancelled because not enough people were interested. That says a lot, doesn't it? But when it was cancelled, I wrote a comment, "Good, this is demeaning to women." For that comment, I was banned from that Facebook page for a month. Now, I'm a retired teacher, so it didn't make a lot of difference to me. Imagine if I'd still been working. Those people who banned me from that Facebook page could have gone to my employer and said all sorts of things about me. My career could have been over. And this has happened to many people. For making a legitimate statement about biology, about biological fact, their careers have been ruined. Graham Linehan, who wrote Father Ted and many other excellent comedies, had his career ruined, his marriage fell apart, and all sorts of other consequences because of stating a biological fact. There are probably many people who love drag queens, think they're marvellous. They're entitled to that opinion. I don't mind if they have that opinion. I welcome people having different opinions than mine. That's what freedom of speech is all about. But this insidious cancelling of people who have an opinion that you disagree with is very, very worrying. And although, I might have started in a little flippant way, talking about comedies and drag queen bingo and things like that, it goes to the very heart of having opinions and being able to express them. Thank you.
So, Peter Marin.
Do you want to take that?
Peter, if you'd now like to go.
Excellent. I'm going to keep it brief. I otherwise would be preaching to the converted. What a worthy debate to have about this topic. It's particularly pertinent to talk about it today, but it's also interesting to reflect a second on why this topic feels so at home inside of the Conservative Party. Why not with the Liberals or why not with Labour? It's because really and uniquely, freedom of speech is embedded in the DNA of this country. It arguably has been the fuel of some of the most prosperous periods in the history of Britain. And it's important to defend it. Why? Freedom of expression is always fragile. It's fragile because it's very easy to convince ourselves that we're right and our cause is the right one to justify censorship. But really what we perhaps need to do is perhaps build the resilience of each other. Perhaps we need to encourage more healthy disagreement. And that is the tried and tested way to wrestle ourselves towards truth and towards a better future for all of us. Now, I'm going to end with one question to reflect on. Aristotle talks about the golden mean. It's this wonderful place where virtue dwells between deficiency and excess. I like us to think, and I like the panelists to think as well, where do we think this place is for the Conservative Party today? And also critically think, how does this differ from the other parties' ideal position? Now, I might disagree with all of you or where that stands, I might disagree with you on where we position ourselves on the spectrum, but I think all of us agree that we're willing to do what it takes to defend our right to disagree. Thank you.
And now can we have Louis Williams?
Thank you very much. And thank you, conference, for giving me these few minutes. Now, I'm going to take you away from the UK for a moment. I'm Louis. I have a company in Colombia and Spain, and I have a lot of Venezuelan staff. Free speech is not just some hypothetical. I was talking to one of my Venezuelan colleagues just the other day, and she talked her fear of sending a WhatsApp message to her friends. Why? Because Cuban, Nicaraguan, Russian, and Venezuelan Secret Service agents are entering into homes, inspecting people's phones on checkpoints to see what they have said, whether they disagree with the thought police of a government. Now, imagine that fear for one moment. Imagine the isolation. Now, you may think, look, it's a tin pot dictatorship in another country. It's away from home. But conference, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In the online safety bill that we passed, we left a little crack, granting Ofcom the need for an accredited form of inspecting for child abuse, potential hateful and illegal material. What does this mean? We have given a potential weapon to break encryption. If this was to come to pass and we were to see a development of governments that we do not like today, a government with not Starmer's chaotic leftism, not Liberal Democrat confusion, not even moments of Tory we don't exactly know what we're doing at times. If we have the threat of a government who starts to push the regulation of what can be said, where can that potentially end? We heard from a colleague talking about a Facebook group where she left a comment, the fear of losing her job. I don't know if you know, but the UK government does not record or break down what part of public order offences and hate crime is hate speech. Over the last 10 years, the number of hate speech recorded offences has tripled. Have a moment to let that sink in. Half of those are for public order, 51% to be precise. Now, many of those may be incredibly indesirable, but should they be banned from being stated? Should we be banning basic speech? Free speech is not about what we all agree with in this House, what things we feel comfortable with. Free speech is about us defending the ability for people to do things we hate, say things we here hate. 2 minutes, I'm done. 5 seconds, I promise. Okay. Think when somebody insults the flag. Think when somebody shouts down an anthem. Think when somebody disparages the values you fundamentally hold. Defend their right to say it. Because once we let that canary die in the coal mine, our very freedoms are threatened. Free speech is absolute. It is not something for what we just agree. Thank you very much, conference, and thank you for your time.
I'd now like to throw this open to the members to come forward. If you'd like to take your places at the blue tags where the microphones are, please, you will stand in a queue, and I will pick different members of you, so it's not necessarily first come, first serve. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Jacob, while people are getting themselves organised, if you'd like to give us an idea of what your take so far is.
Well, it's just so important, isn't it, that we hear already that freedom of speech has consequences. We hear what happens to biology teachers who tell the truth, that they get excluded not by the power of the state, but by a culture that doesn't like freedom of speech. We hear from Peter that freedom and prosperity go together and that it's always fragile. And that's something we must remember. And from Louis, that fundamental point, that difficult point, That point that we all find a stumbling block, we must allow people to say things we don't like. Shocking though that is, it's fundamental to freedom of speech.
Now, I think we'll go to number 1. If you'd like to do your 3 minutes, I will ask you to be brief and I will stop you if you overrun.
Thank you very much. My name is Howard Jenkins. I'm from Winchester. I'm a chartered surveyor. Voltaire said, "I do not agree with a word that you say, but I'll fight to the death to defend your right to say it." And I believe that's a world in which I wish to live. I'm very tired of people who are not allowed to say anything that they want to say. Clearly there is offence in a lot of what people say, and I think it's understood when people are being offensive, and people should then be offended. But to have an opinion is our right, and I hope, conference, you agree with me. Thank you so much.
In the line, number 4, the gentleman standing in the check shirt.
Angus Allen, Colchester constituency. I identify as a Conservative. Many years ago, I was chairman of Bristol University Conservatives, and we had to fight very hard against what was then the no platforming ethos. We had speakers like Ray Honeyford come down, and they were forced to take police protection to be able to speak at a university. Now, a lot of the people who were protesting, they were from some of the best schools in the country, allegedly, and now there are High Court judges, they're the head of the civil service, they're in positions of power, and the attitude they had then hasn't changed one bit. So it's very depressing that 35 years later, we're having to refight the same fight, that people, whatever their opinion is, should be allowed to say it without fear or favour.
Thank you. We're now going to number 2, down here in the front.
Okay, well, my name is David George Gariban. I'm from Milton Keynes Central, and when it's about freedom of speech, lots of people say, obviously, when it's about losing a job, but I think it's also beyond that. It's also like, who are you that you're saying this? It also depends sometimes even on your race, sometimes your gender, what you meant to say, because if you're going to say something more sensitive and you're a certain race or gender, you're going to be much more penalized than someone which is the other way around. Let's say you're going to be a white person talking about race, and obviously, you may have some good points. Given you say some sensitive subject, you're much more likely to get cancelled than someone who, let's say, it may be from a different race or color. And so applies to gender and so much more. And this is also something that is unacceptable and has to be changed, these double standards in freedom of speech. Thank you very much.
And now number 3, who's been waiting in the corner. Say your name clearly.
Thank you. Ray Burston from Hales Owen. A few miles from here, in the suburb of Birmingham, is an abortion clinic which gained a certain notoriety over the last few years because Birmingham City Council passed a public space protection order, or rather used a public space protection order, to outlaw, amongst other things, silent prayer. Now, whatever your opinions of the rights and wrongs of abortion, I'm sure all of us in this hall would agree that we've reached a pretty dangerous point when even what people are thinking or praying in their hearts is considered illegal. So my question to Jacob is, when Labour and Liberal Democrat councils were misusing this law to outlaw silent prayer or even silent protest, why did the government not say to them, no, you will not do this, this is not what public space protection orders are intended for? Thank you.
And now we're down to the lady here at number 1. Please introduce yourself.
Fiona Guest from Hemel Hempstead. My father-in-law was a Hungarian Jew who was persecuted by both the Nazis and the Communists. He said that this country was no longer the country that he came to, the country that he made his own and which he took citizenship of. Why? Because of the loss of free speech. Britain has become a country in which speakers have the halls that they have booked cancelled. It has become a country in which Jewish people cannot walk freely in their own cities. It has become a country in which the police pursue social media posts that rioters rampage. All this is unnecessary as well as being wrong. Harassment was already illegal. So was inciting violence. So were threatening behaviour and behaviour likely to cause a breach of the peace. I urge the next Conservative government to ditch this concept of hate speech and enforce the existing laws.
We're now going to go to the lady at number 4. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Ruth McManus and I'm from Northfield, Birmingham. Just over a year ago, my niece qualified as a midwife and they were told that women giving birth could no longer be referred to as mums and breastfeeding was now chest feeding. Obviously, that's going to please a few people and annoy the majority, and is basically ridiculous because you've got to be a woman to give birth or breastfeed. These changes were written into the NHS, and this is what the nurses were told. And this actually happened, obviously, while the Conservatives were in power. How on earth was this allowed to happen, wasting real important resource for the NHS for absolutely no reason? Oh, by the way, menopause is another one they covered. Thank you.
And now, down at the front, number 2, please.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Zachary Gallagher from the Conservative Association of the City of Leicester. I have a very good friend with whom I will often be found in front of the television set of a weekday evening in Leicester. And the subject of freedom of speech invariably comes up, coincidentally, when we are sitting watching the contributions of Mr. Rees-Mogg as he's warming me up for Patrick Christie's. And my friend contends quite strongly that we don't have freedom of speech in this country, we have freedom of expression. But she's never quite persuaded me as to what the difference is, and I've often pondered, does it mean there are certain things that one cannot say, but one can maybe act out in the manner of the popular parlour game charades, such that one can express them but not say them? And often my imagination has wandered further. If we continue that debate up the M1 towards Scotland, and we cross the border into Scotland, are there certain things that we might say in that vehicle that become illegal in Scotland that would not have been illegal in England, given the difference in law there? If I'd like to respectfully ask Mr. Rees-Mogg in his contribution to reflect and comment on the legal position as regards, do we have freedom of speech in the United Kingdom? Do we have freedom of expression? And are the two interpreted differently within different parts of the United Kingdom? Thank you.
Interesting ideas. Now, number 3, up in the corner, please.
Clive Scowen, Harrow West. I want to raise the specific issue of religious freedom, something that's been the cornerstone of our democracy for certainly a good 200 years, something which has led to, or had led to, an incredibly tolerant country where people could hold a variety of different faiths with mutual respect and with very little difficulty. But now, that freedom to not only to believe, but to act on your beliefs, to, as one of the previous speakers said, even praying is now apparently illegal in certain places, but a freedom also to proclaim what you believe is now very much circumscribed. Time and again, Christian preachers are arrested for saying something unpopular. The same thing, I don't doubt, happens to preachers from other faiths as well. It is in the very nature of religious belief that not everybody's going to agree, and some people are going to be offended. But we must not concede the idea that there is a right not to be offended. There is a right to speak what one believes to be the truth, and others can accept it or not. But we seem to have sleepwalked, it seems to me, almost, into a position where it's really only the popular and the inoffensive which is allowed to be stated in public. Now, I don't know about you, but I would regard any religious faith which was utterly inoffensive as probably not worth very much. Faith whether it's in Christ, whether it's faith in Islam or Hinduism, carries with it lots of ideas that others don't like. But we have to be free to express them if we are to remain or to become again a truly tolerant country where men and women of whatever belief, or indeed of no faith and who want to proclaim atheism, are free to do so without fear, and particularly without fear of being arrested. And I do ask that in the thinking about the programme for a future Conservative government, which I trust will be sooner rather than later, that these matters are given full attention.
And now can we have number one? Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, conference. My name is Tommy Sebastian, a member from Chelmsford branch. I'm just reflecting, we need a fine line between freedom of speech and human right. And we have many examples. The high-profile case, how many years we struggled to expel somebody. I don't know whether I can mention the name, I'm not scared. Anjan Chowdhury. And the previous speaker said, religion is part of a multicultural society. So where is the fine line? We can say, enough is enough. This is not British value. How much money, public money, we spent to run the case against that person, including the previous Home Minister and previous Prime Minister. So conference must think the fine line, while we respect, we are a tolerant country, but we must say enough is enough. Thank you.
You're doing really well for time. I'm glad we can get through so many people. Now, can we have number four, the lady at number four?
Jill from London. This is a question about the role of the police in allowing people to have free speech. I went to a political meeting, well, it was actually in a restaurant, and a very senior member of the Conservative Party was attempting to speak to people, 40, 50 people in a restaurant. However, we couldn't hear because the people outside who were being presumably controlled by the police were exercising their right to freedom of speech, and they wanted to let us know what their views were to freeing Palestine. Actually, the meeting was nothing to do with that whatsoever, but unfortunately, we couldn't hear the speaker.
Thank you. Now, can we go down to number two here?
Thank you. My name is Edward Howard. I'm from the Hartford and Stortford branch. The great American writer H.L. Mencken once said, "The trouble about fighting for human freedom is that you have to spend much of your life defending scoundrels." That's the more mild term, admittedly. For oppressive laws are always aimed at them originally, and oppression must be stopped in the beginning if it is to be stopped at all. And my attitude in regards to this with freedom of speech is that there have been several high-profile cases over the last year or so which show that protecting freedom of speech must start with even like very fringe actors who we may not like, and I certainly don't. So when you have people, for instance, like say Sam Melia, for instance, who's currently in prison for sickering, admittedly not a very particularly good individual, it must be said, but at the same time, you know, he should have his right to freedom of speech defended as well. Or someone like James Allchurch, a man currently in jail for 4 years as well for, admittedly, again, discussing things on the radio, but no, as far as I'm aware, incitement to violence, which would warrant that sort of thing. And the final thing I wanted to bring up was, admittedly, an American case, but involves a Briton, the great Peter Grimelow and his wife Lydia, Vida being strangled by, his organisation rather, being strangled by American lawfare, which, if we're not careful about, could come over here at some point, especially under a Starmer government. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Now can we have number three in the top right-hand corner?
Thank you. Jack Barr, I work in Honiton and Sidmouth. We lost that seat to the Lib Dems next time, but I know with the strong Conservative party platform in 5 years we can win it back, just like your own seat, I'm sure, Jacob. So, my family come from rural East Devon, and I know the importance of embedding yourself into the community. So when I came up to Birmingham for this conference, the first time I properly visited Birmingham, I said I needed to get into the community as well. So we went and watched a game with some friends at Birmingham City before the conference started. And on the bus journey over, I met a fascinating man. And he was talking to me about his life experience. He was asking what I did, and I said I studied politics at uni and I wanted to go and change the country for the better. He said, fat chance of doing that. He said, all politicians are corrupt. Do you know, this is a prevailing view that so many people have in politics today. Because we have a political establishment that has controlled the media and changed the minds of people to believe that we're never going to tackle the issues that real people want. And that starts with free speech. Because not only can people not feel that the politicians listen to them anymore, they feel they can't even voice their discontent towards that. They feel that this consensus has broken out that tells you what to think, not how to think. And that is what we must stand for as Conservatives, and that is what we must change. That begins at university. I went to Exeter University. I set up my own free speech university debating society, and I know firsthand, because I was put through multiple investigations by the university, how difficult it is to stand for free speech. The administrations themselves try their best to stop that happening. And that is part of the reason why so many young Conservatives don't feel able to speak their mind. Somebody made a point in a previous speech that the process of protest has gone too far. I don't think it's protest when you're not trying to have your view, but you're trying to shut somebody else's view down. That's control. That's wrong. Members, we should never stand for stopping other people's free speech, even if we feel passionate about something. So we've got to oppose that. We've got to make sure that we are allowing these people to have these conversations. This man I met on the bus didn't think he was allowed a view because he thought he would be labelled far right. And we know why that is, because this new Labour government is labelling everything they don't agree with as far right. The overuse of these terms, we've heard them all, racist, misogynistic. These are important terms to call out inappropriate behaviour. And Rosie Duffield's been labelling some of those terms at Keir Starmer in the last couple of days, I see. But we all know that when these terms are overused, they are just used by the political left to silence voices they don't agree. So I say to members, if you know you're right, if you know you're standing for something you believe in, don't feel ashamed if you get labelled with things. I've been labelled everything under the sun. Embrace the fact that you're challenging that consensus, you're taking the fight forward, and you can be part of a free speech Conservative vision to change the world for good. Thank you.
Now we have time for just one more question before we hand over to Sir Jacob. So can the last question come forward, and do be quite concise. Thank you.
Hello, conference. My name is Leo and I'm from North East Somerset, so that's Jacob's former constituency. Right. Always our MP in our hearts. So, in my generation, there is a growing stigma for being a heterosexual white male. And I am often told by left-leaning peers at school that I cannot speak on issues concerning race, sexuality and gender. How can we, as a party, address this issue? Thank you.
I'd like now to ask Jacob to have a roundup on all your ideas and to put some in himself. Please, Jacob.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. What an absolutely fascinating series of contributions that we've had. And let me try and answer some of them, agree with many of them. The speaker who said, we have the right to offend, quoted Voltaire. That is obviously true. We should defend the right of Angela Rayner to call us scum, shouldn't we? That's what she wants to do. It's no skin off my nose. Also, she may be a very helpful secret weapon for us. I think people who do all these property transactions are quite Tory anyway. It's much more a Tory than a socialist activity. Now, Angus, who identified as a Conservative, may I join with him and identify as a Conservative too? Probably actually a Tory, but then I'm old-fashioned, as you may have noticed. But Angus made this point about universities in Bristol. I went to speak at Bristol University, and there was security and police and all this sort of stuff. And then Bucher, the Bristol University Conservative Association, got a bill for £600. That is not freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has to be free of cost as well as being free in what you say. That the state must bear that cost, not poor, hard-done-by Conservative students or lefty students. But I also spoke at Cardiff and had a huge array of Palestinian people protesting against me. They were entitled to do so. They weren't threatening violence, but they were entitled to be there and say they didn't agree with me. Ray mentioned abortion clinics. I mean, silent prayer, that's freedom of thought, not even freedom of speech. Of course we should have freedom of thought. Fiona mentioned law and order, and we want the police to enforce things properly. Ruth made the fundamental point about language. We've bought in to the language of equality. Now, I hope our distinguished chairman is a chairman, not a chair. The chair was what I was sitting on. Do you want my very brief lecture? My very brief lecture on the word man. If you go back to the Anglo-Saxon, there were were-men and woe-men. The man bit means people. And where is the last remaining vestige of the word were? Werewolf. They're always male, I'm sorry to tell the gentlemen in this audience. If there were woe-wolves, they would be female, but they never seem to come into fashion. Man is the people bit of it, were and woe. So if you want to be politically correct, bring back the were bit and call us were-men. Chair, were chairman? Anyway, it'll get very confusing. But don't give in to the lefty use of language. It is absolutely fundamental. Clive mentioned freedom of religion, which made me think of John Locke. John Locke, good Somerset man, as all good people from Somerset are, anyway, said that you should have freedom of religion, but that didn't allow you to break the law. What he meant by that was if your religion was in favour of human sacrifice, you weren't allowed to have human sacrifice because that broke the law. But you were allowed to believe that human sacrifice was a good thing. He made one exception. He said you couldn't have freedom of religion for papists because we're too dangerous. I think don't applaud that, sir. I'm going to take offence at that, but I hope we will broaden him out and have freedom for papists like me. And I'll just come finally to Leo. There were so many other good points, but I do want to make some concluding remarks as well. Leo, just as you've shown today, be bold. Stand up and express your opinion. Ignore what the left say. But why does freedom of speech matter? Where has it come from? Well, let's go back to the House of Commons on the 8th of February, 1576. Now, I don't know if many of you were there. I was lounging on the back benches, just keeping an eye on things, when Sir Peter Wentworth got up to speak. And Sir Peter Wentworth is important because he is the first example of the claim of free speech in Parliament. What did he say? He said, "None is without fault, no, not our gracious Queen." And so horrified were the assembled members of Parliament at that they voted to lock him up in the Tower of London. But freedom of speech is something we have claimed as a right for hundreds of years. We formalise it in a parliamentary sense in 1689 in the Bill of Rights. There is absolute freedom of speech in Parliament, both the Lords and the Commons, and the courts cannot overrule it. And why is this important? Well, freedom of speech is at the heart of our Constitution. There are four great pillars of our Constitution, and what are they? They are freedom of speech, democracy, the rule of law, and rights of property. And if you take one of those pillars away, our Constitution collapses. How do you have democracy without freedom of speech? How do you run an election if we can't print leaflets saying that the other side are a bunch of rotters, or words to that effect? How do you print leaflets saying that the Lib Dems are good, honest people if you don't have freedom of speech? I mean, even with freedom of speech, that's pushing it, but nonetheless. Your democracy cannot take place without freedom of speech. You cannot have an effective election because all you get is the message approved by the government and churned out by the BBC. Wouldn't necessarily be very helpful to us. But why does the rule of law depend on freedom of speech? What do those two have in common? Well, again, the law must be in the open. And we've had increasing instances of private justice where scandals don't get revealed. And what if judges are corrupt? We certainly had corrupt judges in the 16th and 17th century. How did we expose that? Freedom of speech. That if you aren't able to say that the judge is taking a backhander, how do you make sure your judges are honest? Or how do you say that the judge has got it wrong? May I just quote my own father, who breaks a butterfly upon a wheel. That was using free speech to challenge an error by a judge. which the judges have never really liked. And indeed, historically, we had laws against it that made it very hard to criticize judges. So freedom of speech protects the rule of law. And what about rights of property? Well, with rights of property, what happens when a socialist government comes along and decides to use a compulsory purchase order, or dare I say a Tory government, because we weren't much better, to take your freeholding, your little bit of land, the house you've lived in and that your family has lived in for generations? You need to be able to say this is being done because they've got some interest in it, or this is being done and they haven't followed the law properly. Your rights of property depend upon your freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is under attack to the peril of our Constitution. Who has read recently about Mr. Fayed, the former late owner of Harrods? Why did you not read a word about him whilst he was still alive in this context? Because we have libel laws and increasing privacy laws that make it harder to reveal things. And yes, the online safety bill has made it possible for Ofcom to have regulations that will curtail our freedom of speech. What happened when The Sun, that great newspaper that in the 80s and 90s exposed scandal after scandal, revealed the news about Hugh Edwards? The left came out and said it was shameful and he'd done nothing wrong and they were ruining a good man. Freedom of speech is under attack. And what about that great spider at the centre of the funding of the Labour Party, my Lord Alley? What is the one thing he's spoken about in the House of Lords? Curtailing freedom of speech and controlling the press. What did that dreadful Leveson report try to do? I was one of 13 MPs who voted against it. 530 in favour. When the House of Commons is united, it is almost invariably wrong. Freedom of speech, oh, just look back over the history. Freedom of speech is under attack. You, ladies and gentlemen, you are the troops who are here to defend it. We are the Conservatives who will defend it. We will defend Angela calling us scum, but we will defend our Constitution. Because without freedom of speech, the other pillars collapse. There is no democracy, no rule of law, no rights of property. And the Labour Party hates freedom of speech because socialism is always exposed by truth. Fortunately, great is truth, and it will prevail.
Thank you very much for those really interesting contributions on protecting freedom of speech, and thank you very much to Sir Jacob for telling us his views and feeding in, perhaps as one of the greatest orators of his generation, on his views. Thank you very much.
size outside? I don't know. I'll just wait. We've got James's team here, so... Kimberly, can you keep it?
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us at the Conservative Policy Forum Hustings. My name is Penny Ann O'Donnell, I'm the Voluntary Director, and it's so good to have such a robust crowd here this afternoon, hopefully for some very interesting questioning for our really highly esteemed guest we have with us today. We have James Cleverly, who has been a party chairman, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Education Secretary and member for Braintree. And some might say, given his army background, he's the big gun in this competition. So, I'm sorry, they're getting worse, aren't they? Right, let me just explain what's going to happen today. There's a format where we at CPF, realising that people really didn't want to speak about policy for the next 10 to 18 months, we've done a survey about what it means to be conservative for our members, our valued members, and we've had just shy of 6,000 responses. And what we've asked, we've passed that data on to each of the candidates, and we've asked them to please frame their speech today around those values, and hopefully our questions will also link into the values. And it won't surprise you to realise that pro-defence was the first one, strong national defence. We had responsibility, personal responsibility and self-reliance. Pro-enterprise, living within our means, and also pro-democracy, where it's pro-family and localism and sovereignty. Pro-opportunity, social mobility, and then principled fairness, pragmatism and honesty, and pro-justice with the rule of law. So those are the values that came out strongest in our survey, and that's what we've asked James to think about when he's putting his speech together. I also need to advise you that we don't have Kemi Badenoch today. We reached out to all of the candidates with the same amount of time, and unfortunately Kemi is not able to make it. So straight after James, that will be the end of the event, but it's going to be a stellar event with James. Okay. Over to you, James. You'll speak for 3 minutes, and then we'll have a chat. Okay.
I have been travelling to associations. I have been eating rubber chicken with that strange grey mushroomy sauce that is too familiar to too many of us for many, 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 many years, long before I was elected to anything. And so speaking to members right across the UK, members of the Conservative Party, listening to their ideas, exchanging my ideas with them is nothing new to me. So when I saw this report, which was a kind of an audit of our collective attitude towards conservatism and our conservative approach to the challenges that the world and the country face, I was very unsurprised. I was unsurprised by the topics, and I was unsurprised by the order of those topics. And the reason why this work is so very important, I think, is there are multiple reasons. The first is that engagement with our wider membership is absolutely key. I talk about unity, and it's often assumed that I mean unity in the parliamentary party, left to right, but that's not really what I mean. What I mean is genuine unity within the party, so that the party professionals, those in elected office, those who are volunteers, those who are officers of associations, those who take such an important role in the affiliates around the party, all have a voice. They all contribute to ideas, and those ideas are harvested, listened to, and brought into the policy thinking moving forward. That's what unity is about, bringing together the whole party. So that's the first part. The second part is because when you make lazy assumptions about what the party currently believes and wants, you run the risk of chasing white rabbits. And we mustn't do that. So the fact that defence underpins the thinking of our party is no surprise to me, and it's absolutely right. As you probably know, I have committed to 3% of GDP on defence spending. I've been the Foreign Secretary, I've been the Home Secretary. I've received reports from our intelligence and security agencies. I've received briefings from the heads of our armed forces, from the heads of MI5, MI6, GCHQ. I know in detail the threats that are lined up against us, and I know how much more we need to do to defend ourselves, our values, and our allies. And then the other things, very much about community, very much about duty, very much about service, very much about freedom. These things underpin our conservative values. Our policies should follow our values, and the way we govern should be very much led by the things that are embedded in that report. And as policy evolves, I will ensure that I continue to harvest the good ideas of the CPF branches across the country and the intellectual horsepower of all our members. So can I thank you for putting the report together? Can I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you? And now I throw myself open to a barrage of difficult, challenging technical questions designed to trip me up. Thank you very much.
James, thank you very much, and I think we're delighted that you think of us with intellectual horsepower. That's got you off to a really great start. I'm just going to ask you a few simple questions, and then we throw it open to the members, because CPF is all about the members. And we want to get as many questions as we can in today. I know many were missed yesterday because of time. Just rolling back a little bit, what did your careers teacher at school think you were going to do when you left?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was finishing my time at school. I had that traditional combination of A-levels, geography, physics and art. Pick the bones out of that. So I provided quite a challenge to my careers advisor. I quite fancied going to art school. My uncle had gone to art school, and he said you can either go to art school or make money, but not both. I quite fancied going into industrial design. Didn't end up going into that. And in the end, I joined the army, which when I first said to my careers advisor, I've decided to join the army and be an army officer, he literally laughed out loud. Because I might not necessarily be in the most disciplined of sixth form students.
Well, think about sixth form students and what often marks our memories about being in the sixth form. What track gets you cutting shapes on the dance floor?
I love a bit of Jump Around by House of Pain. I still love Bootsy Collins, a bit of Bootsy Collins. So a bit of Blue Beat and ska.
Thank
you. Bit of reggae, early first gen reggae that I grew up with at home.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And you've spoken with great pride about your mum's career as a midwife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your mind, what defines a woman?
Well, look, so mum's a midwife, and she's not with us anymore. But it's either X and Y or X and X, and that's it. I mean, that is the bottom line. Now,
that's fine, thank you. Thank you, James, for speaking so clearly on that. That really is appreciated. And given the fact that you have been a party chairman, what would you do to reform CCHQ?
Oh my God, how long have we got?
And can we also do a focus on the candidates department, because we feel that a lot of people are very angry about how they were disempowered around candidate choice in the last general election and selections?
Yeah. So a couple of things. First point, if it's easy to say I will never parachute candidates in. Well, if you've got a week till close of deadline and you've got 100 or 150 or 200 unselected constituencies, you will parachute in candidates. So if you don't want it to happen, you have to do stuff. You can't just say stuff, you've got to do stuff. Which is why I've said we need to select about 300 quality candidates in 18 to 24 months. That is a real job of work. But if you don't want to parachute candidates, that's what we've got to do. We've got to get our data. We've got to get our campaigning data. Vote source is great, but garbage in, garbage out. We've got to really tighten up our data. Our digital campaigning has got to be much, 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 much better. And let me give a final point in this answer. Put your hands up if you have received any training from CCHQ on things like campaigning or fundraising or social media or anything like that. Everyone put your hands up. Better than most audiences. Most audiences I get 2 or 3 hands total. The fact is it should have been every single one of you. Every single one of you should have been made a more professional campaigner by the centre, and then we will actually be a much more successful campaigning machine. Oh, and by the way, bucket loads of money. We need bucket loads of money.
I think, and following on from that, James, what single policy do you think would do most to win back lost votes from Labour? If you're going to make us all better campaigners, what single policy would do most?
So this is where I'm going to upset the audience. I know it's very policy focused. I'm not convinced initially it will be policy that wins back voters. We absolutely have to have policy going into the general election, but the best product presented by a bad salesperson won't get bought. So the first thing we need to do is win back the trust and respect of the voters. That is down to behaviour. We behaved appallingly. And because we behaved so badly, they stopped listening to us. And because they stopped listening to us, when we did things like, cut national insurance contributions, when we reduced inflation, we got no credit for it because they didn't like us. They didn't want us to win. They didn't want us to put policies in place. They wanted us gone. And until they're willing to have us back again, the arguments about policy, this is why I disagree with, at this point in time, having divisive arguments about policy issues that might not actually even be relevant when we get back into government, I think is a strategic error. So let's win back the respect of voters, let's win back their ears, then we can put across our ideas.
And just a quick question following on from that is, how will you do that?
Stop behaving like bloody children.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go any further. That's great. We're now going to open up to questions from the audience. If you can pop your hands up, so we've got a gentleman over there in the third row. If we do two at a time, we've got a lady here in the second row.
Thank you, Mr. Cleverly. I think how a politician imagines their target voter tells you a lot about them. So Thatcher had the thrifty entrepreneurs, Tony Blair had the aspiration generation, Theresa May had the just about managings. And in each case, that affected both how they governed and how they fought and won or lost elections. So I wanted to ask you, and I've asked this of a couple of the other contenders, to paint us a picture of the target voter of a James Cleverly-led Conservative Party. Please, without using the phrase silent majority.
Fantastic. Two at a time, one at a time, one at a time.
So this lady here.
Hello, I'm a local member in Chichester, and unfortunately I'm one of very few young Conservative members in that association. So how are you going to win round the young voters who are the future of the party?
Bingo, thank you. So this is going to sound really self-indulgent, but the voting family that I have in mind is very much the family that I grew up in. So my dad started and ran a small business. My mother was a midwife in the NHS. We had someone in the private sector, someone in the public sector. They were not wealthy, but they were not impoverished. We grew up in southeast London. We grew up in the suburbs of a city. Dad wanted best for our family. Mum wanted best for our family. And they knew the value of money coming in. They knew the cost of money going out. And these days, a family like that would almost certainly be Labour voting, certainly not Conservative voting. And if we are not winning back families like that, that mix of public and private sector employment, that aspirational, not impoverished but not wealthy, if we are not able to speak to the heart of families like that, we might as well pack up and go home. So that's very much as I say, apologise for being rather self-indulgent, but that's how I view the kind of people, the kind of family, the kind of lifestyle that we have to speak to with credibility. And it kind of flows into the point we're making about younger voters. So I was born when my parents were when my parents were in the spare bedroom of my grandparents' house in Catford. They then got onto the housing ladder. A one-bedroom flat initially with me in the bedroom, then on the fold-out bed, then a two-bedroom flat, then a smaller house, then a big house. They had a credible means of turning their effort at work into things they valued. An education for me, a home of their own, a better lifestyle. Again, if we can't credibly show young couples like my parents were back in the 60s and early 70s, that kind of route, they will reject us. Young people unable to get on the housing ladder will not vote Conservative. Young people who are not able to turn their effort into a lifestyle that they want to live will not vote for us. So that's what we have to do, and I think it will cover off both areas.
Thank you, James. We have one question
Yes,
down here, and then Azal. So it's Azal and there's David.
Hi, James. I've just listened to Sir Graham Brady talking about his book, which was very informative, and he was asked why he published it now. He said he felt it might help MPs and the broader membership make a decision about the 4 candidates. What do you think of Graham Brady's book, and do you think it'll help you?
James, really pleased to hear you included affiliate groups in your Unity pitch. Today's our 2nd anniversary, we've been running for 2 years, and talking to many affiliate groups, and there are some in this room as well, we feel that the only time we're contacted by CCHQ or indeed parliamentarians is when you either want money or you want us campaigning. Yet we do things that CCHQ and others can't do. We're closer to the communities. We don't feel part of the organisation. So, for example, if I talk about my own organisation, the Conservative Friends of Small Business, we'd like a formal slot with, say, CPF to talk about business, how we can feed into policy for business. I know Penny and I have been talking about that, so there is some work going on
but that's going to be coming up. So I'm going to shorten the questions. I'm really sorry, and we're shortening the answers.
How do we link into the business groups
really
and into CCHQ for business?
Thank you, Azal.
Yeah, thank you. So as Conservatives, we believe in the liberating effect of competitive markets, don't we? Yes? Someone want to tell me that I'm wrong? Yeah? Okay. Unless, of course, it's CCHQ, in which case we run a monopoly, we exclude competition, we suppress the kind of the new starts and fast growth enterprises that might compete with the power base. I think we should probably stop doing that. I think we should recognise that no individual or entity within the party has a monopoly on good ideas. We should be willing to be challenged, and where functions can be better delivered through our cloud of support, whether that be affiliate groups, CPF, whatever, we should have the courage, the moral, not the moral courage, the intellectual courage to say, our members are smart people, we trust our members, maybe we should also trust their judgment every now and then.
Thank you. Next question. So, right, we've got the lady here in this 4th row back, then we've got a gentleman just behind her, and there's 2 further back. We can get the mic to them as well. Right, so we'll start with you.
Hi, James. Hannah Gray from Birmingham. Nice to see you. A straightforward question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to put you right on the spot. Illegal immigration versus legal immigration. We had some very clear answers yesterday, and I'd wonder if you could just give us your view on that, please.
Cool. Yeah. When you say very clear, if they were simple answers, they weren't answers. Now, it really is as simple as that. If someone sits here in front of you and says, I will put a cap and that will work, and I will pass a law and that will work. We've tried that for 14 years, and the British people don't believe us. Trying it one more heave at sounding tough and under-delivering will kill us as a party. I got to the Home Office with a very clear brief. Stop talking tough, start delivering. The Home Office is doing it back to front, and it was killing us. So I downgraded the rhetoric, and I deported more people. We had a higher rate, under my watch, in the 7 months I was there, our asylum rejection rate went up. Our deportation rate went up. Our net migration rate came down. I gobbed off less and delivered a bucket load more. That's what gets us back into office. And anyone who sits here in front of you or on a stage, whatever, and says, the simple solution is to do this one thing, they either don't know what they're talking about or they hope you don't know what they're talking about.
Thank you, James.
Neither's good luck.
Pass the mic along, chaps, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Kirsch, North West Essex, previously from Braintree.
Yeah.
Hello, James. Brief question. Do we need to talk about Nigel?
Great question.
Nigel would love us to talk about Nigel. There are lists of things that Nigel would want us to talk about. Nigel would love us to have a row about the ECHL. Nigel would love... So actually, go back to your report. And this is why I said it's really important we look at what is actually in our heads and hearts, not what people assume is in our heads and hearts. So I looked down that running order of key priorities, and immigration was not actually that high up the list. It is a really important issue. It is a really, really important issue. We do have to get a grip of it in a way that we have not got a grip of it properly up until this point. But people also recognise that there are other really, really, really important issues. And what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We shouldn't ignore all the other issues and cluster around this ball. We have got to win back voters from reform. Otherwise, we won't win elections. And that really is a priority. We lost more voters to reform than anywhere else. So we have to win them back from reform. You don't win voters back from reform by being the marketing department of reform.
Yep.
So let's stop talking about them quite so much. Let's start talking about us and what we plan to do, how we plan to make the world better. That's how we'll get people back from reform.
Thank you, James. Okay, we've got a gentleman down there. Thank you, Philip. And then the lady with the hand up just behind, Warren. Yep.
Hi James, Alex Clarkson, former parliamentary candidate in Stevenage, and thank you very much for coming to support me. You certainly energised my campaign just when we needed it, so thank you. Just reverting to that main issue that came up, which is defence. I think the 3% increase is on the ball, but we know that kind of nations win wars and not armies, and we can give more money to our armed forces, but one policy that actually went down well in Stevenage, it was badly named National Service, but actually did cut through. Yeah. So how do we, with that dangerous times ahead, how do we engage broader society in defence? It's our top value, but we know that we've got young people that may not fight for Britain, they're not proud of Britain. How would you lead the public in not just kind of supporting us in defence, but making them realise it is not just our number one issue, but theirs too?
Yeah, so we have been living for quite an extended period of time now, I think, misunderstanding the scale of the dangers that are lined up against us. So I joined the British Army, and then the Berlin Wall came down. I'm not taking full credit. I'm just saying it's too much to just write off as coincidence. We then spent decades harvesting the peace dividend, and we've been harvesting that peace dividend for about 20 years too long, which is why our kit is not up to scratch, which is why our war stocks are not up to scratch. I'm a gunner, as many of you know. Our stockpiles of 155 artillery ammunition, large caliber artillery ammunition, is just nowhere near as big as it should be. So the reason I'm so committed to 3% of defence is because we have to backfill the spending that we haven't done properly over the last few decades under different governments. We have to get ourselves where we need to be in terms of new kit and equipment, and we need to demonstrate both internally and externally to our opponents and allies alike, we take our defence sector seriously. That then will pump prime our defence contractors, our defence companies, to actually start producing at scale. And once we take it seriously, actually, we would, ironically enough, it will reduce the likelihood that we will need to ask British people to take up arms. The guy, and again, this is not all about me, but I am the one on the stage at the moment. People assume that because I grew up mixed race in Lewisham, I got into lots of fights. I didn't, because I was the biggest guy in the room. People pick fights with people they think they can beat. When they don't think they can beat you, they don't pick fights. So let's make sure no one ever wants to pick a fight with us.
Just to get back also... So, was there an element of wanting to recruit more people into the military there in your question as well?
Yeah, not just recruit, but kind
just briefly, was there?
Recruit the mindset of the public, though. Yeah.
Okay. I think you've covered that.
And actually, there's some hygiene factors here. So we're actually we're not bad. We are actually not bad in having people want to join the armed forces. Our mechanism for processing recruits is appalling, and we lose a lot of people just because the admin around recruitment is so shockingly bad. And our retention's really bad because the military estate, the places where we ask these people to live, is absolutely unacceptable. So the ambition of the British people is there. The logistics, the administration around it is falling short.
Thank you very much, James. We've got 2 more questions in the row behind, and then we've got to come to one last one. It's flown by. I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
Is that okay? Thank you. What's your position on children socially transitioning in school without parental knowledge or consent?
So childhood, adolescence and puberty is really confusing, hard and difficult, and that's if you get it right. Yeah? I clearly missed the memo when we collectively decided that children dictate to adults and adults don't teach children. Because that strikes me as a bit of a recipe for disaster. We know, and this is not a criticism, it's just a statement of biological fact. Human children are born with not fully developed brains. It's how we get an animal with a very large skull through the pelvic bone of a woman. But that's how other animals don't have this problem. Deer are born pretty much ready to rock and roll. And they are up on their feet within minutes. They are running within hours. Humans don't do that. So this was the biological trade-off that we made through evolution. We have big brains, but children are vulnerable and unfinished for quite some time. If we lock things in, particularly if we do things which are irreversible medically, because someone who is not yet fully formed is dictating to adults whose job it is in life and society and evolution to protect those as yet unfinished and precious creatures, we're screwed. So let's stop doing that.
I don't want to interrupt you. James, you put that so eloquently. I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm getting the wind-up signals from people. I'm really sorry about this. I think we have time for just one more question. The gentleman with the blue tie.
Hi, James. As a young Conservative, I see day to day young people who are interested in politics but would never vote for us. They're always Reform or Labour, and I very rarely come across a person who is willing to vote for us. And by the next election, all these people will be on the electoral register. What are we going to do to get more people to vote for us?
So, again, I think some of this is policy stuff. But as I say, before that, there's something we do need to get fundamentally right. We need to change quite fundamentally, and that's our kind of our tone, our collective corporate personality. I've said that one of the things that worries me is that we've drifted into the habit of being the grumpy party. We've never been the nasty party. I don't believe that for a second. But we've slipped into being the grumpy party, dour, downbeat. And people of all ages, but particularly young people, want to feel part of something. They want to feel part of something positive, part of something optimistic. And whilst Reform, for example, and I said I don't want to be the marketing department for Reform, but I think in response to your issue, it's a really important point. They've created a buzz. It's a bit chintzy, but like the fireworks, the kind of banners, they've nicked it straight from the American convention scene, which is high energy, high ambition.
And do you think it's fair to say they're disruptors?
They are market disruptors. Yeah. They are market disruptors. And when you're an incumbent, when you're a market incumbent, as we are, there's two ways you respond to a disruptor. You either up your game and utilise your first mover advantage, or prepare to be made obsolete. I have no intention of letting the party that I love and has given me so much become obsolete any time soon. So we need to get more energetic, we need to get more upbeat, we need to get maybe a little bit more pizzazz, put the party back in Conservative Party, and that I think will win over young people. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you so much. Thank you very much. Well done, well done.